Hello and welcome to the Kim Iversen Show. So, you may have heard about this lawsuit between a group of American attorneys and journalists who are affiliated with Julian Assange suing the CIA and Mike Pompeo. Now, they claim that the CIA violated their constitutional rights by recording their conversations with Assange and copying their devices after visiting him in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, last month, the CIA tried to get the case dismissed. But in a big win for the plaintiffs, a U.S. District Court judge ruled the case can proceed. So tonight we're talking to one of the plaintiffs in this case, attorney Deborah Herbeck. Deborah is an entertainment and media lawyer at the Manhattan law firm Herbeck Kunstler. She has provided legal support to WikiLeaks on media law matters since 2015 and has visited Julian Assange on numerous occasions. So we're going to dive into this recent case against the CIA, as well as the case and where Julian Assange is at with his potential extradition to the United States. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, an important conversation. The case against Julian Assange affects all journalism, and the exposure of empire lies, the exposure of the military-industrial complex, and of the surveillance that we have. So this is a very important topic, an important conversation. Debbie Herbeck, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim, for having me.
So first of all, I guess I have to ask, how did you get involved with Julian Assange to begin with, to where you started visiting with him and made it to the Ecuadorian embassy and all of that? How did you get involved?
Well, I was initially brought in when a German broadcast television company was seeking to interview Julian in the embassy and use some footage from that interview in a documentary that they were producing on Edward Snowden. And I was brought in really just to negotiate the terms of them being able to use the footage and, the terms of the release. So just strictly in a media entertainment law capacity.
Okay, so they just came to you and said, we have this footage and we want to use it. And then how did you then get connected with Julian from that?
It was the other way around. Julian had reached out to his human rights attorneys, who I knew. It was Michael Ratner at the time, who's since passed. And Michael Ratner's was a long time colleague and mentor. And he knew that I practiced in this area, and he didn't have the expertise to negotiate these kinds of releases. So he brought me in.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So then when did you start meeting with Julian?
Well, the first time I met with Julian was probably in late 2016 to summer of 2016 or thereabouts. And then there were, it was always related to media matters, whether it's book contracts or issues with filmmakers trying to tell the story of WikiLeaks and, basically just negotiating deals with them.
So when did Julian, let me just kind of get my facts straight because I want to kind of go through the history of this, but when did he get transferred to Belmarsh? Because he was in the Ecuadorian embassy for a really long time.
Yes, he went to the Ecuadorian embassy in 2012, and he was there until April 11th, 2019. So it was about 7 years.
Wow.
So he's been in maximum security prison in Belmarsh in London since April 2019, which is, almost 5 years.
Yeah, so he's been incarcerated since 2012. I mean, effectively. I mean, he was at the Ecuadorian embassy, so he wasn't really incarcerated at that time, but he was imprisoned in a way he couldn't go anywhere. Otherwise, they would capture him and take him away. So he's been...
Exactly. It was basically house arrest. There was a arrest warrant out for him, and so the police were basically surrounding the embassy 24/7. And had he stepped out of the embassy to try to go anywhere, they could have arrested him. The Ecuadorian government at the time was quite sympathetic to human rights issues and offered him asylum in the embassy, and that's how that came to pass. In fact, I believe it was Michael Ratner who negotiated the sanctuary for him. And that was why he was protected within the embassy grounds.
Wow.
So effectively, it's Ecuadorian territory when you're inside the embassy.
Right. Right. So that's where this case kind of gets interesting because you're inside of Ecuador, technically, and the American government is spying on you while you're talking to an Australian citizen. Is that right? That's fundamentally what happened.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So we were in a situation where what we believed we believed we were in a situation where the people housing our client were sympathetic, and we had no reason to believe that anyone was working on behalf of the CIA, and indeed they probably weren't for many years. The problem started in the beginning of January 17.
When did you first visit with him? What year was your first visit?
My first visit, I believe, was in mid 2016.
Uh-huh. And then how many times did you
And
go
I
visit
visited him
him?
once or twice a year thereafter.
Okay.
Once or twice a year since then.
And then do you still see him now in Belmarsh?
Yes, I saw him in May of 2023.
Oh, so fairly recent, less than a year ago. Um, how is he
Yes.
doing? How's he doing there?
Oh, it's just horrific. He's being kept under horrific conditions. It's a maximum security prison. He's allowed out of his cell for 1 hour a day. He's extraordinarily depressed and gaunt looking, and it's just a horrific situation for a journalist and a publisher to be kept under the same roof as terrorists and treated as if he's some kind of terrorist is just a horrific situation.
Why are we not getting any images of what he looks like now? I mean, we hear this, but we're not. Why won't they release photographs, or have they? And I just haven't seen them, or you're not allowed to take pictures of him when you're there.
You're not allowed to even bring a cell phone or photo camera into the prison. So those have to be checked at the door. So with the security at the front. So there probably don't exist any photographs of him since
Doesn't
he's
that
been
just seem?
incarcerated.
Doesn't that just seem like, especially since this is a London prison, this is a UK prison, which is supposed to be part of the Western, democratic world, and doesn't that just seem? I mean, to have a country say you're not allowed to take photographs of the prisoners, so that we can't see what they look like and what their treatment is and what kind of conditions they're living in, and none of the public is getting to see any of this. I mean, that is just so suspicious, right there. I mean, that should make all of us say that shouldn't be allowed. They should be forced to release photographs of these people so that we know what's happening inside of these prisons. It just seems
That's
absurd.
probably true. I mean, it is, to be fair, it's standard security protocol not to let cameras into visiting rooms and such. But I doubt if a request were made for a journalist to be allowed in, a photojournalist, I'd be really surprised if
Yeah.
they let photographs be taken, but I don't know of any such request. So I wouldn't want to say that it's been refused. I don't know if it's actually been requested.
Yeah. I would imagine that it's been requested, but they're just refusing. I would love to see the reasoning for why we can't have photographs of prisoners to see what's happening inside of these Western democratic prisons, right? In the system.
But this is what this is all about, is lack of transparency. I mean, they
Right.
don't want us to see how our fellow citizens and journalists are being held, and any prison is a despicable situation. I mean, I used to practice criminal defense, and I stopped because it was just so depressing and horrible going into jail and leaving people in there, no matter what they're alleged to have. What sort of offenses they're alleged to have committed or even did commit. And, I joke, not really funny, but I joke that my career's come full circle because now they've started locking up journalists now that I'm a media lawyer. So I'm back in jail again.
Right. Okay. So for this lawsuit that is against the CIA and Mike Pompeo, how many instances of is this like a one instance where you went in, they confiscated your phones, and you're saying they spied on you this one time, or was it repeated times that you're able to put into this lawsuit?
So it's a bit of a complicated answer. There was when Julian was first put into or first given sanctuary in the Ecuadorian embassy, these protocols were already in effect, whereas visitors, you would check at the door your passport and your cell phone, if they had cell phones then. But and it was ostensibly for his protection, and probably was. And so the actual protocols had been going on for some time. What happened was that in around January of 2017, the CIA basically recruited the private Spanish security company that had been providing security at the embassy, and this was unbeknownst to anyone. And so it was from our lawsuit covers the period from January 2017, when David Morales from UC Global, the Spanish security company, was recruited, through March of 2018, when that company was replaced with another company under a different protocol. And so it's anyone that American citizens who visited Julian at the embassy within that time span. So honestly, I can't quite remember whether it was once or twice for me. Probably once within that specific time
Which is
span.
bad enough. How violating. I mean, did you expect to, well, how did you even find out? So how did you find out that the CIA was that had recruited the security company and they were spying on you?
Well, it was so horrifying on so many levels. Because first of all, we had assumed that the security guards at the Ecuadorian embassy were Ecuadorian government employees. I mean, we just made that assumption. They were wearing uniforms. I mean, maybe that was stupid, but they were speaking Spanish. We had always made that assumption, and they were very friendly and very nice. And we hadn't noticed any particular change in personnel. So it was a complete surprise. The way that we first learned of this was from El País, the Spanish newspaper. What happened was, after Julian was taken to Belmarsh, it became clear that there were violations of his rights while in the embassy, and basically using UC Global as the tool for that. Julian commenced a criminal investigation in Spain. And it's a bit different because there's such a thing as a private criminal prosecution in Spain. So a private citizen can initiate a prosecution. And in the course of that prosecution, which is presided over by a judge in Spain, a special court that presides over these criminal prosecutions, the police, Spanish police, had raided the offices of UC Global in connection with the crimes alleged against UC Global, and all of that material was then the court had access to it. Julian's lawyers in Spain had access to it, and this El País eventually found out about this material existing. Technically, it's under seal, most of it, but it basically leaked, and they did this expose in about October of 2019, I believe, and that was the first time that it came to our attention that UC Global that the guards were not Ecuadorian employees, that they had actually been downloading information from our phones and other devices if we'd left them, and it was violating doesn't even begin to explain it, because as sort of journalists and lawyers, and there were doctors too, we are charged with holding confidential information, and it's
Right.
We expect to be respected. So it was horrifying.
I mean, this is just so shocking. It's shocking that the Ecuadorians decided to contract out with this other company. And I mean, it's just so that alone is just so bizarre, right? That they would go and contract, I suppose, rather than having their own government workers taking care of their embassy's security. But I just wonder if the Ecuadorians, I mean, do you know if they went after this company at all? I mean, it seems like it would be a crime if they're technically on Ecuadorian soil doing this. It seems like that would have been a crime in Ecuador. And they would have said, well, now we're going to arrest these guards that were spying on all these people and this company. And we're gonna prosecute the individuals who are responsible for this crime. That's what it would seem to me. But do you know if Ecuador did anything, or was Ecuador in on it? Were they like, okay, we're gonna allow the spying now to happen, so we're gonna contract with this other company in order to have a loophole to allow spying?
Right. Well, what actually happened is there was a change in government in Ecuador, I think in 2016. So the Ecuadorian president, I think it was Correa, who had granted sanctuary to Julian in 2012, was no longer in power.
Uh,
And the president who took over, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but the president who took over was essentially a puppet for the US government and would do whatever the US government wanted them to do. So we don't have any particular evidence that I know of that of the extent of the collusion, but clearly they must have, I imagine they must have known it was going on or been, tolerated it. It was more the Spanish government that was upset or in a position to prosecute because the jurisdiction of the company that was actually committing the crimes was located in Spain.
yeah, and have they done anything? Do you know anything about what the Spanish have done about that company?
Well, the criminal prosecution is ongoing.
Okay.
The judge has been very, very unhappy with the lack of cooperation from the CIA. They have sought to the equivalent of depose or interview Mike Pompeo. He's ignored that request. This is coming from a high court judge in Spain to the U.S. government and to a U.S. government agency. The U.S. has basically stonewalled this investigation.
Yeah.
They haven't even denied that their agency was part of it. They've just ignored every request from the Spanish court to help them in this investigation.
Wow. Okay, so you guys realize that you've been spied on. Do you know of exactly what was taken from your phone? Is that part of the lawsuit? Like, exactly the data or the information, or you have a record of it, or do you just know that this company was spying during that time that you visited?
What we know is that there were some leaks to El País of some of the material that's in the possession of the Spanish court now, and I certainly know that I haven't seen as part of that evidence my own personal file. But there were, for example, one of the most egregious was a woman, Stefania Morizzi, who's an Italian journalist who's follows this case a lot and is a good friend of Julian's and very supportive of WikiLeaks. And there's photographs that you can find online, or I can send them to you, but they're broad swaths of information that was grabbed from her. I mean, there's Yoko Ono's passport. There's notes that Pamela Anderson had written, and even her cell phone number or the password to her cell phone. So we've seen the extent of their, of what they've done to other people similarly situated. We know that we all went in and gave up our devices, and so we have good faith basis for assuming,
Right.
or there's no reason to think they wouldn't have done the same to us. It's up to
Right.
them to prove they didn't at this point.